Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today on experiential learning for remote courses. I see that we have several participants in attendance today, and we're expecting a few more. Thanks to each of you for joining live from all over the world and from different time zones. We are delighted to have you here all with us for the next 45 minutes or so. My name is Rimi Zakaria. I am an associate professor of management at the University of Wisconsin in Whitewater. I also serve on the Online Teaching Resources Committee of the International Management Division at the Academy of Management. I had taught my first online course about 8 years ago, and back then, as many of you may recall, online courses were primarily asynchronous. The professor's role used to be largely hands-on. And since then, online classes have made monumental strides. I'll tell you this from my personal experience that my own remote and online courses are much better today than they were a few years ago. Thanks to technology, thanks to all the pedagogical research, as well as the faculty development initiatives that inform our teaching methods. Our webinar today is about bringing experiential learning activities into your virtual classrooms. As many of you scramble to move your classes online as quickly and as effectively as possible, we wanted to offer some support. Whether you teach at the undergraduate, graduate, or executive programs, whether you teach international business, global strategy, or international marketing courses, we hope you can consider applying some of these techniques that we're about to discuss today. With that view in mind, we are joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Each of our panelists authored many high-impact research papers, which many of you have read and cited, as well as they've authored scholarly and pedagogical monographs. More importantly, together, they bring years of experience teaching in higher education, including in remote, hybrid, and online settings. I will introduce each of our panelists to you properly shortly before their presentations. But for now, let's take a look at the agenda. We will start with a brief presentation on the relevance of experiential learning in virtual classrooms. Then our first panelist, Dr. Bill Niebury, will share with us his view as an expert professor of international management and global strategy, and also as a chairperson leading the Department of International Business at Florida International University. Our next panelist is Dr. Bill Schiano. He will convince you to bring case-based teaching into your remote classrooms. Several years ago, he certainly convinced me to experiment with case-based teaching. Our last panelist, Dr. Vas Taras, will talk to you about his award-winning virtual and multicultural student consulting project, X-Culture. And finally, you'll have the chance to have some of your pressing questions answered by our expert panel. With that, I'd like to start with a definition of experiential learning. Experiential learning is recognized as a pedagogical approach, of course, to facilitate learning through the application of theory to a concrete experience. It requires individuals to engage in activities that prompt learners to immerse into doing and feeling, and to watching others do something, or to thinking and reflecting upon their experiences. According to educational psychologist David Kolb, experiential learning is the process where knowledge results from the combination of grasping and transforming experience. Experiential learning in the traditional and face-to-face classroom engages learners in interactive and collaborative activities. And while many of us have known experiential learning as something to be offered in real-world setting, recent studies show that some of the components of experiential learning can be effectively mimicked in an online environment. It is possible to offer students with opportunities to reflect, synthesize, collaborate, and to reconstruct various concepts and new information, even in a remote setting, whether through synchronous or asynchronous delivery. The course adjustments initially will involve more work for you as an instructor, but importantly, you'll find the results to be more rewarding. And even more importantly, the research shows that students find experiential learning highly engaging. They are greatly motivated when learning through experiential, when they're learning through experiential activities, and it's very effective for developing analytical, interpersonal, and decision-making abilities. Studies also show that many students are able to learn faster and retain the content longer when they're learning through experiential learning. Before we move on to the panelist presentations, I'd like to clarify some logistical items here in case you're joining just now. Please use the Q&A panel on your screen if you have any questions for the panelists. If you'd like to engage in conversations with other attendees, you may use the chat panel. As I'm certain many of you, our participants today, will bring wealth of experience and enthusiasm today into the mix. So with that, it is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. And while Bill sets up his presentation, here is his brief bio. Bill Newberry is professor and chair of Department of International Business and the Ryder Eminent Scholar of Global Business at Florida International University. He is currently serving on the executive committee of the International Management Division at the Academy of Management. He is also the president of QB, the Consortium for Undergraduate International Business Educators. Bill has published more than 45 articles in top-tier journals, along with 3 scholarly books and another 20 chapters in edited books. With that, I would like to turn this over to you, Bill.
Okay, so everybody can see that? So thank you very much, Rimi, for organizing this panel. I'm very honored to be here with the other panelists, Bill and Voss. And I'm going to give a more general presentation, and then Bill and Voss are going to get more into particulars. So I'm going to talk a little bit from the department chair perspective on scheduling and how to incorporate the remote experiential learning into remote classes. First, I'd just like a brief background on FIU, since FIU comes from a certain place in online learning. We've been doing online since 1998. We were the first college at FIU. College of Business was the first college at FIU to incorporate online learning. Today, FIU Online is a central academic unit for online courses across all colleges and schools within FIU. FIU, it's a huge university. We have 57,000 full-time students, and over 10,000 of those right now are full-time online students. So it's about not quite 20%, but it's still a huge number of students taking online courses at FIU. We offer 1,179 unique online courses, and we've seen over the past 4 years 200+% growth in online student credit hours over that period. And this was prior to COVID-19, when everything obviously went online, fully remote or online as of last March at the university. And so just, pictorially, you can see, we started, on the left-hand side with, little between 20 and 25% of our courses were online. And then all of a sudden, all that right-hand portion went, remote within one day, at FIU. This created great transition. Even with a strong base, it did create great transition issues for our university, as with every other university. And how do you immediately transfer all these courses to remote teaching? And how do you deal with transfer faculty to learn how to teach remotely, as well as things like experiential learning, which is our focus of today's conversation. So next, I'll just briefly state some issues, as a department chair that, I have to consider, that I consider when, I'm scheduling and staffing people to teach remote or teach online courses. And these are important because these create some of the conditions that facilitate experiential learning later. And so, first of all, a primary issue is just health and safety. Do faculty have underlying medical issues? Are there family issues? Children at home because their school is canceled? And so I need to consider that when figuring out who's going to be teaching in remote environments versus not. The second thing is prior online experience and training. FIU, working sometimes with outside organizations, has a lot of opportunities to train people how to teach better online. Rimi mentioned, she's gotten a lot better over time at this to get the types of training. One organization that FIU works with extensively is Quality Manners. And they're an organization that basically certifies online courses that meet certain criteria that enable the professor to give an effective lecture online that doesn't necessarily lose anything from the in-person delivery, and sometimes even adds elements that you couldn't do in person. And so this is one that FIU actually has the goal by 2025 that all online courses will be Quality Matters certified. We also have programs for hybrid courses and remote certifications as well, to make sure instructors have the capabilities to do this. Obviously, this can be done immediately. Takes some time for training, but the training, is very doable. The other thing I'd point is, even though FIU has a strong FIU online support team, when you go from 20% of the courses online to 100%, that team's very stretched. And so this has created some issues, and so on and so forth. And so these are some of the things that, department chairs have to deal with. The next thing I'd like to just point out is, when we think of online experiential content, we can think of it both, the sources and the level. So it can come from, very close by in the department or your college, the university, or the external environment. I'm going to briefly touch on some opportunities there. And it can also come at different levels. At one level, just having guest speakers coming from the business world can bring an experiential element into a course. So in-class exercises. At the other level, more program level, is things like internships or specific company projects built into classes where they work on a consulting basis with a company to get that real-world experiential content. In the middle, we have global network programs, which Voss is going to talk about. And we also have case studies, which Bill is going to talk about in a second. So some sources of within department college and the college sources for experiential content. First of all, I think it's good to take advantage of diversity within the student body. So even without going anywhere, if you have a student body with students from outside, the United States, or even outside the particular location within the United States, you can bring that diversity into the classroom and build exercises around this. You can also take existing initiatives and make them virtual. So Dave Wernick, one of our professors, has an annual project. He leads people to India every year. And they consult with the Bandari village, and basically are helping a group of females build products that then they sell in the marketplace, both in their village, and they take them back to the U.S. and sell them. During the summer, because students couldn't go over there in person, he's had several virtual internships where he's basically led the students to come up with projects related to this bigger project, for example, ways to sell the goods overseas, or ways to structure their business cross-national. And this has been very enriching. There are other things like cybers that have sometimes sponsorships for students or faculty participation in programs. And at FIU, we have an Office of Global Initiatives, but it's called different things at different universities, which basically is an office within the College of Business that promotes partnerships and networks with other universities. And taking advantages of these kind of organizations can help you in coming up with experiential content. Within the university, and I'll go quickly because I know time considerations, we have a University International Programs office that has a similar network of universities that we partner with. We also have an Office of Global Learning, which is a very strong source of content that you may be able to build in your classes. There are centers in other colleges that have great collaboration opportunities, whether it's political science, law, languages, sociology, engineering, and as well as faculty in these other colleges. Since international business issues are inherently cross-national and cross-discipline, working with these other colleges can be a great source of advantage. And then finally, externally, there's a lot of opportunities here, and some that, faculty I've noticed in our department are taking advantage more in the virtual environment than even before. For example, we have a Brazilian professor who has contacts in Brazil, in both businesses and the chambers of commerce in business, and he could never bring them to the classroom in Miami unless they were visiting on their own. But, in a virtual environment, he's been able to bring them into lectures and have them, give real content to the class, even in a remote setting. Obviously, alumni are important. There's international business teaching networks like Cyber or Quibi. And finally, there's global network learning programs like X-Culture, which FOSS runs, and COIL. And then finally, some obstacles. Technology availability is an issue in classrooms. At FIU, we have some really high-tech classrooms, but they're not all that way. And so figuring out, what you can do in the classroom you're assigned is important. Faculty time, motivation, and focus. People are often stressed in the COVID-19 era, and it takes time to plan experiential activities, and when people are dealing with a lot of issues at once, sometimes it's difficult. There's also sometimes uncertainty regarding the remote time frame. Do we know, is it going to be one more month? Is it going to be a whole semester? And this creates, some issues. Is how do I plan for something if I don't know for sure it's going to be remote or not? And finally, university support resources. Could also be stretched in the COVID-19 era because people are doing a lot more because all these courses are online. And so with that, I'll say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to present, and I will turn it back to Rimi.
Okay, thank you so much, Bill. So it's very reassuring to hear that our institutions value innovative teaching methods, and there are some great opportunities to enrich our remote classes. With that, our next presenter is Bill Schiano. Bill is Professor of Computer Information Systems at Bentley University. He regularly facilitates Harvard Business Publishing's case teaching seminars, both in person and online. Bill will share with you his observations and best practices on teaching with case studies. As many of you know, from your face-to-face teaching, the case-based method heavily draws on student participation and engagement. The role of the instructor in case-based teaching is to serve as the conductor of an orchestra, and the primary responsibilities of the instructors are to facilitate class discussions, almost in a way to unify the individual students as performers. The instructor then helps the learners to identify the connections between one context and another, and between theory and experience. With that, I am delighted to invite Bill Schiano. I will hand it over to you shortly, Bill.
Thanks so much, Rimi, and welcome everyone. And no, the irony of having the case facilitator come in and lecture to you is not lost on me. But I do hope to share some of my experiences from the last few months in particular. I've been teaching online and teaching cases synchronously online since the 1990s using, in those days, very dedicated hardware, and now Zoom, WebEx, Adobe Connect. And in particular, in the last few months, I've been working a lot with faculty around the world trying to migrate their courses online quickly, and in particular trying to do that with a widely distributed group of students and all the challenges with that. So what I'd like to do is share the things that I found to be most interesting, most surprising, and most helpful for case teachers and faculty in general that are trying to move online to create an experience online that's going to be experiential, that's actually going to be a conversation among the students. If you just give me a moment to get the controls set up, there we go. And the first thing that I always hear is something that I hear from faculty in traditional classrooms. How do we get the students to prepare? And it is a larger barrier. But with much of the online case teaching, the issues are very similar to traditional classrooms, but they're amplified. And so the solutions, the good news to this is that the solutions are to make better use of the skills that we have from the traditional classroom. So explicitly having a plan to communicate to students and following through on that. They should get many messages from us even before the course starts to try to set that standard, to establish that we're expecting them to participate. We're expecting them to prepare, that they need to read these cases and read the theory and apply the theory to the cases, but calibrating our expectations. When I speak with faculty, the numbers I hear are somewhere between 65 and 90% is roughly what we can cover if you're trying to map a traditional classroom onto now a virtual delivery in terms of the synchronous component, just because of the time lags and the different ways that we process electronically. So when we set that standard, we've got to make sure it's calibrated right, but it's crucial that we hold it. That we have some deliverables maybe ahead of time. They have to answer a poll, they have to do some group work, something that's going to force them, or at least encourage them more strongly to do that work ahead of time, to be prepared. And then if you don't have the resources to provide more feedback, it's great. If you tell faculty, give them even more feedback, that takes resources, right? We just heard from Bill as a chair, limited resources. So having groups provide that feedback, giving the individual feedback earlier so that they understand that they're going to be graded on this, and using more peer feedback, making it more student-centered, giving them more of an experience of building the learning together. Engaging everyone. We have to convince them this is worth it. Why are we doing cases? Well, if we're studying international business, we can understand the international domain far better if we're understanding the details of the workings of a company that are operating in different countries and trying to make that work. Ask better questions. Are we asking questions people want the answers to, that they're interested in asking? It takes more effort. It takes some focus on the part of the faculty member, but it's incredibly important, just as it is in the traditional classroom, but more so here because they're distracted. You're all distracted. I'm sure many of you are answering email or doing other things. So are our students. We have to be better. The class has to be more interesting, and we have to convince them that it's worth doing. Letting them prepare a little bit in the moment. You take a couple of minutes to write this down. Maybe use the chat window, which is, by the way, open. Feel free to speak to one another during this session. Warm call. So Rimi, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask you to say something that gives the person a chance to focus up a little bit, get their thoughts together, setting up role plays, letting them step into that, having that experience, really immersing themselves in the role, using small groups. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And finding reasons to call on them. Maybe they have something in their work experience that's going to be useful, a prior course that they've taken. Maybe they're shaking their head or they're looking like they don't believe what's being said, using that nonverbal feedback, polling them, or just calling on them. But getting everyone involved and keeping track of that is absolutely critical if it's going to feel experiential, if they're going to have a meaningful experience in this synchronous time. The synchronous time is precious. We need to use it well, and engaging them in that way is going to be critical. Using that chat window, but being realistic. When that starts flying, it can be really distracting. Are you going to be able to manage it? So get some help. Maybe a teaching assistant. In most of our classes at Bentley, we don't have that. So assigning a student each class or for part of a class to monitor it and to let the faculty member know when there's something that should be discussed in the video conference that's happening simultaneously. Maybe using it for groups at certain times. But be very careful about the subtle downsides of this. When I talk to faculty, they say, oh, it was a great discussion. There was lots of chat. And then when you unpack the chat a bit, there's lots of people saying things. but they're not really part of a conversation. They had something they couldn't say, they were frustrated by that, they get to type it out and it shows up in the chat. It doesn't mean that it registered, and it doesn't mean the idea was challenged. So they may leave the classroom thinking their idea was right, that was the solution, this is all going to work, without getting that critical feedback they'd get if it was part of a conversation. So managing that chat, using it well, is an important piece of it, but a very powerful way of drawing out students, of engaging, of making it more of a community. So maybe using it part of the time. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of cognitive strain, it's a lot of cognitive load, but it can be very, very powerful. Making more use of groups. I will confess, and I apologize, it zoomed out a little bit. There we go. I'm not a huge user of breakout groups in traditional classrooms. Online, I use them a lot because I teach for 2 hours and 20 minutes. We've been in this session for what, a little under half an hour, and I'm sure you're already, some of you are distracted. That's just the nature of the beast. So letting them go into small groups and talk to one another for a couple of minutes and come back, perform larger tasks, very, very powerful. But it needs to be managed. Making the transitions smooth, making the instructions much clearer than in a traditional classroom, because once they go in those groups, it's hard to know what's going on in detail. And we want to be able to manage those groups, and we want them to spend their time effectively. So facilitating that process. Don't let the first 5 minutes be them asking, what are we supposed to be doing? How do we do this? Be really clear about that and about what you want them to come out of it with. What's the deliverable? And what are we going to do with it? Is the deliverable absolutely clear? And do we care about it? And are we going to show that we care about it? Are we going to use it in the next exercise? Are we going to share it amongst the groups? But make that delivery efficient. We don't want to hear from 7 groups in a row all saying basically the same thing. Figuring out ways around that is critical. So where is case teaching headed? I think you're going to see a lot more of it. I'm talking to a lot of faculty now trying to bring it into their classes to make it more engaging, to bring the experience into the synchronous online space. And we're getting better at it. The tools are evolving, the tools are getting better, and the cases are getting better. We're starting to see simulations, multimedia cases, ways of thinking about the case study, and possibly even case studies that are going to emerge during the class, almost the way a traditional B or C case would. Maybe we're showing tiny snippets of video or sharing something, and then having that evolve in the moment. I think it's an incredibly powerful way of bringing experience into the class. I'm really looking forward to discussing it with you now. And if you have further questions after this, please feel free to stay in touch. I'm easy to find. And Rimi, I did hold to my time, so I'll be pleased with that. So I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Bill. All right, so the last person standing now between you and the Q&A session is our next speaker, Vas Taras.
All right.
Vas is the founder of the X-Culture Project, an award-winning student collaboration platform. I personally used the X-Culture Project myself multiple times for my graduate international management course. And many of my online students have been very appreciative of their multicultural experience through X-Culture. Today, Vas will share with you about the ABCs and beyond of integrating cross-cultural and virtual projects and bringing it to your remote classroom. With that, I will hand it over to you, Vas.
And it's embarrassing to say, but I'm trying to share my slides, and I can only share a file or whiteboard. Is that
I am handing it over, and you will shortly see the prompts.
Okay. But as we're waiting for the prompts, okay, now presenters. So, okay, here we are. So there are some courses that can be taught through lectures and readings and, you know, the traditional methods of teaching. But then there are some other courses that you really have to have this hands-on experience to understand the subject. Like, for example, if you wanted to teach people how to swim, you can give them the best readings about water. You can, you know, invite the best lecturers to teach about swimming. But until people get in the water, they will not be able to understand how to swim. And it is my experience that it's the same thing with international business. People really have to get into water, sort of, so to speak, into an international environment to fully understand international business. And so this is what we do in Experiential. Let me go back to the first slide here. We literally create this international environment for the students so that they can experience in real life what we are trying to teach them in the classroom. So that when I'm telling them that, for example, doing business with Ukrainians is different than doing business with Americans, they know what I'm talking about. They have experienced that in real life with real people from different cultures, from different countries, from different time zones, so that they really have that understanding and not just simply, theoretical knowledge. And so, yeah, X-Culture is a project that has been around for about 10 years, going into year 11. In a given semester, we have about 6,000 students, had a little bit more than 6,000 students last semester. They come from about 150 universities in a given semester. Depending on how you count the countries, we get about 80 countries represented by the location of the students, about 45 countries by the location of the university. All 6 continents represented, all major island groups around the planet. And so what we do is we take those students and place them in global virtual teams in a way that each team is comprised of people from different countries. So there would be, let's say, 7 people on the team, 1 in the United States, 1 in Ukraine, 1 in India, 1 in Canada, and 1 in Brazil, for example. And so they would be working on a challenge, on a project across their time zone differences, language differences, cultural differences, institutional differences. So basically experiencing in real life what we're trying to explain to them in the classroom. Now, a few years ago, one of our professors was doing a consulting project for Mercedes-Benz, and they were trying to come up with some ideas for a marketing strategy for their buses and trucks. And so they decided to invite these culture students to kind of brainstorm some of those ideas. And it worked so well that ever since, I think it was 2013 when we did it the first time. So now we would select up to 12 companies in a given semester. And so those real life companies would give students real life international business challenges. And so this way the students not only work on something, but they work on a real challenge from a real company. So this way the students sort of get 2 things or 2 kinds of experiences. On the one hand, it would be the international experience. So they complete the project with people from all around the world. But on the other hand, they also get the business experience or business consulting experience. And we actually designed it to be, exactly like it's done in the real consulting world. So there is a real CEO or founder of the company. The students have live webinars with the client representatives. They have regular exchange of information by email, via these webinars. They have a real challenge. So basically it's set up almost to be like a real consulting firm. In fact, many businesses offer aftermarket commission for some of the best ideas. Many students get internship offers, some even get job offers. So there are all kinds of incentives that go into this that may not be quite the same as, a salary for your sort of daytime job, but it's still much more than just simply a component of your course. So you get real compensation, you get real opportunities. If you do well, you can get something much more out of this than what you would expect from a regular course. And then obviously at the end of the project, we give students not only the Experiential certificate, but most importantly, recommendation letters. So students take them when they go for job interviews, when they apply to grad school, when they, pursue their career. Lots of interesting stories when students say that they were in a job interview and there were 25 other job applicants waiting, for the interview, and the interviewer was kind of bored. And then the student says, oh, by the way, but I completed the Experiential project. Here is my recommendation letter. Here's my certificate. And the interviewer kind of wakes up, oh, you did like a real project with people from all around the world. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. And before they know it, they got the job. And now for a few years now, for about 7 years actually, we also try to sort of amend that purely online experience with face-to-face experience. And so twice a year, we invite our best students to what we call the Culture Symposium. So we will have one in the fall, usually in the United States, organized jointly with the Academy of International Business, the U.S. Southeast Division, and then another one in the summer that we do independently on the Culture program. And so this semester or this summer, it was supposed to be in Singapore. We had to move it online for now. Last year it was in Canada. Before that it was in Italy. So that's where about 200 people come together, meet their team members face to face, with some of the client organizations, do a lot of things for about a week, now in the face-to-face settings. Again, the main sort of project for the 6,000 plus people is all online. Very suitable not only for face-to-face courses where it becomes kind of part of the course, but also for online courses. We have quite a few participants, teachers who teach online only. And so what's beautiful about Xculture that not only it kind of supports the subject itself, but it also adds this sort of social interactive component. One of the challenges in online courses is that it is sort of hard to create an environment where students collaborate with their peers. And so Xculture kind of adds that element. So if you're teaching online, it will help you sort of add that interactive component to your course. So it's not only just, read this chapter and do this example. There's also some peer-to-peer sort of work going on. Another thing that we added also a few years ago is what we call the Xculture coaching program. So a lot of students wanted to participate the second time, sometimes the third time. They just liked it so much. And so at some point we invited them to be the coaches to the new generation of Xculture students. And so at some point we created a whole training program, 16 training modules that the best students from the last semester take, and then if they pass 4 tests, they become coaches for the new generation of Xculture students. So we teach them how to give feedback, how to resolve cross-cultural conflicts, how to do team counseling and things like this. And so this way, first they gain experience as team members, international team members, and now they gain experience as coaches, mentors, managers of those international teams. Extremely useful experience. In fact, one of the problems we have with those students is that many of them get job offers while they're still in the coaching program, and so we kind of lose them, which is a good thing because that's why we do it. We want to help them to get jobs, but then they become so successful at getting jobs that sometimes they have to drop out before they can finish the program. And we did a bunch of studies, looking at whether or not it works. I mean, this is kind of simplified representation, but overall, yes, it does work. So we know that students are more satisfied with the courses. So compared to the control groups that had same lectures, same professor, but no international project. So the teaching evaluations go up when you have this Xculture international experience. So professors get substantially higher evaluations, and I did it for my course, as several professors also participated in that study. So students are happier and more satisfied with the course than me as a professor, but also we see an improvement in cultural intelligence from before to after. We see an improvement in motivation to work with people from other cultures, an improvement in confidence and ability to work with people from other cultures. Surprisingly, we even see an improvement in the performance on exams for the course. So same professor, same lectures, same readings, same test, but one group had the Xculture experience and the others didn't. And those who did, they do better on the test, even though the questions are not really related to the project. So it seems like there is some sort of motivation going on, and people like, I don't know, probably study more because they believe now it's more important. So whatever the reason, it goes up. So all kinds of good things happen. And yep, so that's basically briefly about it. By the way, the next season starts in the end of August 31st. So if you're teaching this semester, international business, international management, international marketing, consider adding Xculture to your experience. So you'll get not only a better teaching experience, but we also collect tons of data. So it will be a good research opportunity for you, access to other professors in the network. So all kinds of great opportunities for you as a professor, but also for your students. And so all in all, as I said, it's all about experience. It's in a sense like a time machine. So Xculture, whatever students experience here, the challenges with the team members and time zone differences and all that, it will be the same thing in the future. So sometimes when students sort of, not really suffer, but experience challenges and say, oh, somebody's not replying, or, it's so hard to talk with these people because some of them speak with accents. We say, well, that's precisely the point, because when you do it as part of your job, it will be the same thing. So in a sense, now we give you a preview of the future. Yep, that's the idea. So I'm done with my presentation, and I guess we can move on to questions. How do I stop sharing my screen? That's the only question.
Thank you. Thank you, Vas. I will share my slides right now. So I would like to thank each of our panelists. Your talks make it evident that there are so many ways we can take remote learning to the next level. And the first decision seems to be to select a suitable experience or perhaps a project that fits the course given our individual teaching styles. And from there, we can support learners with appropriate scholarly resources. We can create a digital and emotional safe space to welcome discussions and collaborations. And in the process, we can train students to deal with complex managerial problems. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor for Q&A. And we do have several questions here. Let me read out a few of those to you.
I see there is a nice note from Dave, so I'll just take the opportunity to thank you, Dave, for your kind words. They mean a lot to me. Thank you.
So the first question is that I'm choosing is from Douglas Johnson. The question is, can students enrolled in courses other than international business or international marketing participate in X culture? For instance, it seems it would be useful to students in leadership, organizational behavior, and so on and so forth.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. And so while we do have most of the students from international business, cross-cultural management, international marketing courses, we do have quite a few students from courses that deal more with communication. We have some students from leadership courses, more and more from entrepreneurship. And we even have some students from, like, for example, there is a school in Mexico that enrolls a class of engineering students. And for them, it's not even part of the course. It's simply, you know, the engineering school believes that no engineer should get a diploma without being able to work with people from other countries online. And so they literally enroll about 50 students every semester just so that they have that experience, even though it is not even part of a course. So the challenges from the dozen companies or so are so diverse that no matter, not really no matter, but as long as your course has something to do with business, there will be probably a challenge or a component of the challenge that fits very well with your course. So leadership for sure definitely would be a good fit.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vas. The next question, I think, is more general. So any of you can attend that question. It's in online classes, are there particular technical tools that you have used and that work well?
I also saw there was, sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I think a lot of it depends on the individual professor. I mean, my view is use the simpler things before the more complicated things. So, I think Zoom actually works very well. I think, Zoom, I like the Brady Bunch feature where you see the faces. A key is, getting students to show the faces. I know in some cases it's not, not a reliable thing for certain reasons. I can't, but I think there are breakout rooms in Zoom. Once you learn how to use them, can be very effective. And I think, as Bill said in his presentation earlier, he had never thought about using them, didn't use them as much in person, but online it really helps. And I think things like little polls can bring the class to life a little bit. My sense is, don't try to get too complicated with the technology. Use things relatively simple, and it tends to work. So, I also saw a question on there about case studies in Zoom, and Bill may have, in terms of recording participation. I think Zoom, like a regular class for grading a case study, you really need to know who your students are. So learning their faces and their names beforehand, and having for me, when I do cases on Zoom, immediately after the class is over, I have a spreadsheet. I go down the spreadsheet. I say, because I forget later, right? But then I go down the spreadsheet and I record. This person had some good answers. This person, kind of was a little superficial, but at least they participated. This person didn't say anything. And the one thing that online lectures, and particularly in Zoom, can help is you can record them. So if you don't remember quite what happened, you can go back and listen to the lecture again, which gives you a second opportunity to mark students. Whereas in an in-person class, If you miss something because there's just so much going on at once, you're going to lose the opportunity.
And you can speed up that video when you're watching that video back. You don't have to watch it at 1x speed, which really helps. My ear got to the point where I could do about 2.1 times regular speed, which in a 2.5-hour class, that does help a great deal. And I agree, Bill, the technology, there was a question specifically, which one's best among all the choices. I think I've taught in every one of them at this point, except Google Hangouts. I've used Hangouts, but haven't taught in it. And the choice really doesn't matter that much. There are pluses and minuses to each of the tools. And I agree with Bill, it's the basic functionality and using that. What's holding us back largely is not the technology, it's the pedagogy. And it's getting the students engaged and providing that experiential opportunity within the synchronous class.
If I may say something maybe not very popular about this online teaching and technology, so maybe because I've been teaching for a long time online, for about 10 years, all my courses have been both online and face-to-face. Maybe it's a little bit different now with COVID-19 because people are forced to go online. But in the past, my online students were students who chose to take courses online, not because it's not available face-to-face. And those students tended to be students who have full-time jobs, who are busier, so students who sort of took it online so they don't have to be on a specific schedule. And so what I did, and surprisingly, not only did I have very high teaching evaluations compared to other professors, but sometimes even higher than my face-to-face course, is that I specifically designed it to be asynchronous. So I specifically recorded my video lectures, same lectures that I give to my in-class students, but they would be recordings. And so I deliberately didn't do anything face-to-face or synchronous other than my office hours. And so the way it was designed, it would be exactly like the real class in class, with the only difference that instead of showing up for the in-class lecture at a specific time, they watch it whenever they have a minute. And so students seem to appreciate that very much. So you still get the video lecture, you still get all the same experience, same exams and everything else, but without the need to be in a specific time at a specific, in a specific place at a specific time. And so depending on your sort of audience, that may be a preferred method. So if the audience are, have little time, maybe it's not even a good idea to force them to be in a lecture in Zoom. Maybe just deliver the lecture as an optional lecture, record it and make it available to those who could not attend live. Because if you make it, a requirement to be online at a specific time, there will be always some people, technology didn't work, the sound was bad, and so you will have some complaints because of that. So I tend to be quite liberal about those things.
Yeah, can I add something on to Voss?
Sure.
Yes. So I think he brings up a really important point. At FIU, our online courses are almost by definition asynchronous, and people are trained when they go to the quality matter certification and so on. On techniques like Voss said, use shorter videos, have chats afterwards, things like that. But it is designed to be asynchronous. When we switched all our classes, our face-to-face classes to remote, FIU made a very strong distinction that remote is not the same thing as online. So in FIU terminology, a remote class, if it had a face-to-face, if it had a set time period, you use Zoom to meet that set time period. And I think the realization is, and I think Voss hit on this too, is that, the people who choose online, and we have a growing number of them, they choose it because they're working, because they can't meet a specific time schedule, and so they need to learn a different way. But there are also students who chose face-to-face because they need that rigor of having a set time to meet and being forced to show up to class at a time. And some students need structure in a different way. And so for the remote classes, we demand, faculty have a set time because the students signed up based on they were getting education, we get a group at this time. And the online, we treat them differently. And this is very important because when someone switches from teaching online to teaching remote, all of a sudden, not all the techniques don't work. The things that work for asynchronous learning don't necessarily work exactly in a remote setting where everybody's there at the same time, and vice versa. So this is an important distinction. There was also a question in there about hybrid and remote certifications. For the online, FIU uses Quality Matters, but there weren't external ones available for hybrid. So FIU has actually developed their own hybrid certification. If you go to hybrid.fiu.edu, you'll find some information on it. And if anybody's interested in developing a similar program at their own university, I'm sure if you click the information link there and ask the question, someone would be very happy to give you some information on that. Because they've basically set up a 5 or 6 week training course for hybrids. And then when remote came along, they came up with a very, very quick one that was basically a 1 session just to make sure people had the basics. And again, if someone emailed me, I could send you the link for that one as well. It's not so short as to say hybrid.fiu.edu, but the FIUs, kind of work to develop some of their own training to complement external training. I'm sure the people at FIU would be very proud actually to share information with other universities if they wanted to do similar things.
Thank you so much, Bill. And I think we're running out of time, but I would like to take a question that came up a few times, and it is to Bill Sciano, is that the question is that how do you create an engaging class in an online setting, and especially with case studies?
And so I tried to answer a couple of those questions in line, but basically when we're talking about engaging, it's similar to engaging students in an actual classroom. So asking good questions that the students are going to have an interest in answering, making the content relevant, so tying it back to the other cases in the course, the theory, whatever the objectives were in the course, and getting the students to speak with one another, not individual conversations with you. And that becomes much harder to do. It takes more practice to do online, but it becomes even more important that if they're having a conversation, so setting up debate, setting up role plays, anything that's going to get them to the point where they're building on points one another made, where they're speaking back to one another, that's going to be a lot more engaging than you talking. Otherwise, as Vas is describing, if it's going to be mostly you talking, then record those videos and don't force them to come synchronously. For me, the synchronous has to add more value. If it doesn't, then let's do this asynchronously. It's inconvenient for everyone to be meeting synchronously. We have to show that there's value in doing it. And just to build on those points about the students not necessarily being able to get in to meet at the synchronous times, I'm perfectly willing to inconvenience my students for the course, but it can't be unreasonable. If they have work or family obligations that prevent them from doing it, then fine. But if they just don't feel like it, I'm arrogant enough to think that the course is worth it and that they should be inconvenienced and they should do it anyway. But finding that line's very difficult, so I talk with each of my students individually about that.
Rimi, I noticed there are quite a few technical questions about Experiential, so maybe, I don't know, if you guys email me, just Google my name, the first link will be my university page with my email. I will send you much more information, the Experiential handbook. I think that would be a more efficient way to answer the questions. So. Hello, hello.
Rimi, you're muted.
Right, correct. Sorry. Thank you. So as we're running out of time, and unfortunately that's all the questions we can take for now. But if you have any further questions, you're welcome to email me. I will curate all the questions and share with our panelists, and they will send their responses to me, and I'll share with you. So with that, I would like to encourage you to dive deeper into remote teaching in the form of experiential learning. And we really hope that you picked up a few tips and ideas. Thank you all so much for joining today. And the questions were great. I hope the discussions intrigued you to bring some of these teaching techniques into your virtual classrooms. Especially, I'd like to thank our panelists for their time and flexibility. And I know that given the depth of your experience and knowledge and expertise, each of you could easily offer your standalone 45-minute session. So thank you again for your time and flexibility. And finally, to all you, our colleagues and educators, on behalf of the Academy of Management, I wish you all the very best as you design and revise some of your future remote courses. Thank you so much again for your participation. Stay well, and goodbye for now.